I just have an appetite for learning. I like to win. I'm competitive. I naturally have like a predisposition toward sales. That's the secret. There's no secret. Just work.
If any successful person tells you that there was no luck involved, they're full of shit. Because there's always some luck involved, and usually it follows hard work.
Culture can become secondary unless you prioritize it. Do not get into a situation where you have less quota capacity than what your revenue target is. If you're running a high velocity sales team, an SMB team, I think you need to be in person. I don't think remote sales environments work well for people who are early in their career. Every good thing in my professional life has come from cold outreach in some capacity. Now, maybe your cold outreach sucks. You need to work on your messaging. Cold calling sucks. That's why it works.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Hello, go-to-market leaders. If you're like me, you're probably feeling the AI FOMO. You're certainly not alone. And that's why HG Insights created the next generation of sales AI report to calm the FOMO and help you bring AI to your go-to-market teams. It includes a breakdown of the sales AI landscape, the adoption of Gen AI and sales software across different buyer groups, plus an analysis of the top 75 trending sales AI tools. And why HG Insights? Pretty simple. They've been writing market reports for years as the pioneer of tech adoption and market insights. And they are trusted by go-to-market leaders at the likes of Snowflake, Five9, Google Cloud to help improve go-to-market efficiency. So if you're thinking about AI for your sales team but unsure where to start, this free and ungated report has got you covered. Check out the link in the show notes. Now on with the show. Welcome to the GTM podcast. Always appreciate you lending us your eardrums for the next 45 minutes. My goal is always to leave you with some actionable tips, tactics, strategies that will help you scale your business or the business that you're currently in, the growth stage of. And I've got a great guest, someone I've been hoping to have on the pod for quite a while now. I am joined by Martin Roth. Martin, welcome, man.
Thank you for having me.
Martin is the former longtime CRO at Levelset, from its very first dollar in ARR to later being acquired by Procore for $500 million in 2021. Currently, he's the founder of martinroth.com, which specializes in helping startups go from 1 to 10 million in ARR. He's an investor. He's an advisor. We're extremely fortunate to have him as an LP in GTM fund. And a fun fact I just learned as I was doing some research before this, you were also employee number one at a flip-flop company back in 2009 before
OG.
Getting into tech. I love it. I feel like from selling flip-flops to $500 million acquisition by Procore feels like a pretty damn good
There's a book
title
there
for
somewhere,
this episode.
or at least
right?
a podcast episode.
Yeah, exactly. But man, let's get right into it. So, you did the thing that just about every early stage operator, many of which are listeners to this podcast, aspires to do. Take a startup from literally zero to an incredibly successful exit. And, along the way, having a 10-year run, which is pretty unheard of in our world, and getting to wear many hats from director of sales to VP to CRO. Certainly rarefied air, my friend. What's the secret? How did you do it?
I didn't quit. I guess that's like the I don't mean to speak in platitudes, but man, it's building a company's hard. 0 to 1 is really hard. 1 to 10 is really hard. 10 to 20, they're all different versions of hard. And there's so many times that you're just like, do I have it in me? And then you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, self, you can do this. And then you get back out there. But no, there's no secret. I was really lucky. I came into a situation. So how I arrived at Levelset. So before it was Levelset, it was called Z-Lean. The company, it was a place for contractors to file construction liens online. Like that was the business. No venture funding. I think there was some like friends and family, like angels, very small investment. This is 2012 when I met Scott Wolf, the founder. And he had been running the business on the side. He was an attorney and had this as a side business. And it was just like think of it like an e-commerce business, but with digital products, right? So you could go online, like LegalZoom, you could file this document, it would take care of it. It's all transactional revenue. And so I was really fortunate that I had, number one, a world-class founder, Scott Wolf, who took a chance on me for like no obvious reason. I was 23 years old. I was a failed entrepreneur. I would say I was a founder of a company. We had raised some money. We ran that for 2.5 years. It was a consumer product, group gifting, or I guess like what Venmo is now. Like that's kind of what I did not invent Venmo. I want to be clear. But we invented something very similar that had wallets, so you could do group gifting, and we just never got it off the ground with enough revenue to continue raising money, which is the name of the game in B2C. And then I was doing odd jobs. I was like petty cabin in the French Quarter in New Orleans, like, for cash, and then promptly going out like every night and spending all the money and then doing, that is not a good place to be. Sold insurance, like health insurance, for about 10 minutes, or really like 2 months. I was doing that job, and I tried to sell Scott Wolf health insurance, like for the company, thinking that it was much bigger than what it was. I mean, at that point, they had 3 employees or 4 employees, and he's like, "Well, I need somebody to come run sales." They just built the first SaaS product, and so they were trying to go get recurring revenue. But they had a pretty decent amount of transactional revenue. It was probably doing, I don't know, 20 or 25,000 a month in transactional. And so I joined, and for the first 2-3 years, I mean, I carried a bag and had to go figure out how to do enterprise sales, and made a bunch of mistakes along the way. We had success pretty quickly. Like we got to $1 million within the first, I don't know, 15 months, 18 months. I don't remember exactly what the time stamp was, but it was all by going after enterprise, like $100,000, $300,000, $500,000 deals. And as you know, or as many people who listen to this know, if you're a 7-person company, as I was employee number 7, if you're a 10-person company and you go get a $1 billion enterprise customer to pay $200,000 a year, they're expecting a lot out of those 10 people. And so we very quickly got ourselves into a situation where we had to really figure out how to serve those customers. And all the while, we just were really good at content. We were driving traffic to the website by creating educational content. We owned the long tail of search terms around construction, lien rights, and payments. And that's what I mean when I say I got really lucky that there was a marketing machine that's really was our founder, who was just prolific at producing content. And that made it a lot easier for me to build the SMB sales motion that we ended up being the core sales motion that we built at Levelset. I mean, as we scaled, there was always a mid-market and enterprise component. I always ran the enterprise pipeline off the side of my desk as we were building the team. But yeah, we served all of the segments eventually, but the core business was this SMB, high velocity, $5,000 average deal size, 4-day median sales cycle, transactional sale to small businesses, to contractors and roofers and plumbers and electricians, and fill in the blank. That was the world we lived in. So what's the secret? I mean, I don't know. I just have an appetite for learning. I like to win. I'm competitive. I probably am like naturally inclined, or have like a predisposition toward sales. I don't know what my disc profile says about me, but I'm sure it probably directly overlaps with sales leader or account executive. And so, it's like I found my home. I was always a hustler. I hustled flip-flops at Feel Goods, which if you go to Whole Foods, you can still, like flip-flops, they have them in Whole Foods now. That was the first. So I was 19. We drove literally like all over the Eastern United States from Whole Foods to Whole Foods, checking the end caps and like making sure that the flip-flops look good and talking to the buyers. And that was probably like my first experience with sales. But nothing really prepares you. If you've never done software sales, nothing prepares you for going into like B2B SaaS sales. So you have to like really just lean into the learnings. I remember there was this podcast, I don't even know if it exists anymore, Bowery Capital. It's in New York. The Bowery Capital Startup Sales Podcast. If anyone listening to this is at Bowery Capital or knows them, I think the guy's name's Mike. Please have him reach out to me. Like I owe this guy a Christmas ham or something because it was 2014, 2015, and he's having like Mark Roberge like in the early days of HubSpot before they went public, and like really bona fide sales leaders on there before Sasser was. I mean, Sasser was early. There was Sasser, the Startup Sales Podcast, and like a handful of other resources. Mark Suster, like his blog was out there. There was a handful. The people who've been selling as long as I have know these blogs and podcasts because that was like the education that we had. You didn't have all of the content that you have now. So anyway, that's the secret. There is no secret. It's just work. The other thing is, I live in New Orleans. Levelset was like the only venture-backed company in New Orleans. Where else was I going to go? I'm going to move. Like, so we made it work, and I was surrounded by incredible talent. Like that OG team of 7 people, like the original, call it like a founding team. I'm not a founder. I'm not going to claim to be the founder of Levelset, but that founding team, CTO, VP of customer experience, chief legal, our CFO, who kind of came later, but like that group, everyone stayed with the organization in executive roles the whole time. So you have this like managerial like durability. I don't know what the term is for that, but there's like dynamic range of each of these individuals when you would get together, skills complemented each other, and everybody pushed each other to grow and be better. And like when you're in that environment and you have a product and a customer that you care about that feels good to sell to these people because we help them get paid faster on their construction projects. That's a good place to operate from. It's the most important thing I've ever done in my life so far is building Levelset alongside a bunch of awesome people.
Hell yeah. I love that. And, I can think of a lot of similarities of my own journey of kind of like fumbling around different versions of sales and startups before finding tech, and then, having this huge gap in learning and looking for all these different places to try and fill that gap. I don't even know if I knew about podcasts like super early on in my career. I think it was like still books like Mark Roberge's Sales Acceleration Formula and Trish Bertuzzi's Sales Development Playbook. Like just you actually had to consume these books from like not that many sources that were talking about, software sales and how to scale companies.
Look, predictable revenue. That's
go.
number one.
That one lasted about 12 years, I think.
The rebrand, sales acceleration formula. These are like, look,
That's a good one.
These are like, it's a rite of passage. You have to go through all the books because it's the stuff. Like that's what they say. If you just do what they say, then it works. Like
it's genuinely what I did. And like TBD if like all of them will still work in today's world, but certainly when they came out, like all you had to do was convince your leadership to do this thing that you read in this book, and it would genuinely work. So I agree. Well, if anyone from Bowery Capital listens to this podcast, hit up my man Martin. He's got dinner waiting for you.
Yeah. But the other thing, it's funny, like you say, if you can convince leadership, like that was the, I guess, unique position that I was in, and we were young. Like I was young. I guess I still
23 years old. It's crazy.
I was 23 years old. It came in, you're closing deals and it's like, okay, well, this is working. I need more bandwidth. Let's go hire somebody. Okay. Now you got to go figure out how to hire and who to hire. And like, boy, is that a lifelong like pursuit of learning how to hire well. I still haven't figured it out. I mean, I think I'm better than most. I have more practice at the very least, but like learning how to hire, learning how to performance manage, building sales playbooks. It was, 10 years of just full of lessons in learning how to be a salesperson, learning how to be a sales leader, learning how to be a leader of leaders, learning how to be an executive, learning how to raise capital, learning how to manage a board, like all of those things. If you have an appetite for learning, that's why I love the chief revenue officer role or revenue leadership, executive revenue leadership, whatever the title is. It's such a wonderful role because you get to touch like every part of the business if you choose to. And I think the best revenue leaders know that they can influence, even if they don't control it. They can influence product, they can influence finance, they can influence customer success if that's not part of the revenue org. They can influence marketing, but you have to be curious and you have to go pursue it. So I didn't quit, mostly because I was surrounded by amazing people that I was committed to. I definitely am like loyal to a fault. So I wanted to go finish the job that we set out to do. I mean, by God, we had put so much time and energy into it. I wasn't going to leave like in the top of the ninth inning without seeing the game end. Like I had to finish the deal. But I was challenged the whole time. Like I was interested in what we were doing, and we were working in a fast growing company, venture-backed company. Every 6 months, it's like a new business. There's more people. We grew quickly, and that forces you to grow. If you're not growing, then you're just going to get left behind. So I think that I'm an ambitious and like competitive person, and I think it was the right petri dish of ingredients. And then a little bit of luck goes a long way. Like we did a lot of things well, but we also got incredibly lucky along the way, and maybe we put ourselves in the position to get lucky, whatever. But fortune and fate, and there's all of that stuff involved too.
Yeah, for sure. Can't remember who said it recently on the podcast, but basically along the lines of, if any successful person tells you that there was no luck involved, they're full of shit. Because there's always some luck involved, and usually it follows hard work. So just quickly, like setting the table. So what was the rough ARR range when you got acquired?
So I tell this story in this way. It took us like a year and a half to get to $1 million.
Yeah.
It took like 5.5 or 6 years to get from 1 to 10.
Wow.
And there was a bunch of mistakes along the way. 10 to 20 took like 18 months.
Wow.
And then we got it up to, I don't know, 25-ish. It's all like, it's public, like Procore. And if you look at the earnings calls, it's all there. I think we were at we had revenue in different bands. We had ARR, we had transactional revenue. We also had finance, like we were financing, we had a financing product, we had a payments product. So like all in revenue was approaching 30-ish. And I'll be honest, I don't remember exactly what the ARR was. I stayed on for about 1.5 years after the acquisition. I left about 1.5 years ago. So, it's all like fuzzy numbers in my brain. But yeah, so my scale of like getting it to a particular number, when I, like at our peak velocity, we were booking, $1.5 million to $2 million a month in gross new bookings. And total company size was probably between 350 and 400. But a lot of that was like, we were investing a lot in product that was like not directly tied to revenue. So the revenue per head number was probably misleading. And then the revenue side, I don't know, on the sales team, there's probably 75, 80 people.
Wow.
Across like RevOps enablement, that's probably another 15-ish. And then the CS side, including operations, was another probably 80 to 90. So that org is pretty sizable.
Yeah. And did you have sales, marketing, CS, ops enablement, BD, partnerships? Was everything under kind of your purview, or did you have a counterpart?
As we scaled, we started to specialize. So it was initially sales, marketing, customer success was one org. And then over time, like Gretchen, who ran our CS team, she kind of took customer success and operations and pulled that together, and then that became its own org. I'm a sales guy. I wish that I was better at marketing. I spend more time learning about marketing and copywriting and all of the persuasion and just funnels and all of that stuff. I love it, but it's not my my natural skill set. And so it was pretty obvious. Like once the marketing team got to a handful of people, it was like we need to go have like a real executive marketing leader. So at scale, revenue was new logo sales, install base sales. So sales team owned expansion, upsell, renewals, all of that was on the revenue side. as SMB, mid-market enterprise, SDR team, and then all of the ops and enablement rolled up to me. I didn't have BI. That was on our VP of Finance, our CFO's team. But yeah, so for me, it was new logo sales, install base sales, operations enablement, and SDR.
I love it. It's also so critical for leaders to have that, self-awareness of like where your blind spots are, where you're maybe
Yeah.
not as naturally talented. And I feel like there can be leaders that hold on to things just for the sake of holding on to them and not going out and looking for a counterpart, another leader that can fill those gaps instead of, pretending like you are the best at something just to maintain control.
For sure. And another thing is like along the way is, I'm sure people who listen to this podcast can relate. Along the way, if you have P&L responsibility, like part of the job is when you go find talent that's available, you find a way to get it on the team. And so I was always like, okay, if I have to give up 2 sales heads for right now so that I can go get this awesome growth marketer, okay, I'll give up some P&L. I'll hire the person. Maybe I'll manage them for a bit. And then if we have a senior marketing leader or an executive marketing leader come in, they can have them. So that's why it's like the lines aren't totally clear, because as the team grows, there's just like, we just all had our hands in the work and working on it. And I didn't have a big ego about like, it has to be mine or I need credit for it. I was just like, look, if there's good, smart people that can come and help, that know how to do the job, get them on. I'll give up some of my budget, or it doesn't matter to me. Just like build a team and let's go. So there's there's everybody at an executive level has their fingerprints all over the org if you're doing it right, I think.
Totally. And that's so critical. You described earlier how like tight the original 7, kind of founding team members were, and that probably just sort of bled through the entire organization as you scaled.
Totally.
Like,
It set the culture. Like we
Yeah.
were, say culture is like Brian Halligan had that post on, I can't remember. It went all over Twitter and everybody was talking about it. But one of the it's like learnings from $0 to $25 billion. I can't remember what the blog post was, but he said that culture is your second product.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And each of the founding team members, certainly the founder is like the number one influence on culture. But each of those early hires has so much leverage on the culture in a positive way or a negative way. And we just, like I said, we got really lucky that we had this group or this cocktail of individuals that came together that all offered something unique and different from each other to the culture. I'd say like if we obviously had a great product, we served hundreds of thousands of customers on the transactional side. On the ARR side, we had 5,000 customers at scale. Like we were really making an impact on the industry. But the other thing that we did that made a lasting impact on a lot of people was the culture that we built, which, everybody says, or maybe not everybody. I assume everybody
Not everyone
says that their culture is great. We really did, man. Like it was a incredible.
Maybe when they're there, but when they're on this podcast
After.
looking back, not everyone says the culture is great.
No, I mean, I still like, that's the thing that you miss is it's always the people that you miss whenever you're after acquisition, or at least I've learned through therapy and talking with a bunch of other post-exit founders. But when I look back on what we did well, or like what I would want to carry with me to the next, if I have a backpack that gets me from last chapter to the next chapter, or what do I want to put in the bag? So many of the core values that we had, or just the rhythms and how we made the culture come alive and attach the work everybody did to the mission and the vision. We did that in an exceptional way. And I think it's hard to do because it's so easy to prioritize other things over that. There's always a customer or something to do with the product, or you got to hit a revenue number, and culture can become secondary unless you prioritize it. And that was, that's definitely, it made the experience a lot better as an employee or as a part of the team. But it also was like this learning experience for everybody. And that was a really rewarding part of the journey.
Yeah. certainly the stuff that sticks with you is, the late nights with your team or the early mornings or those times when you're just the creative juices are flowing and you're all together and things are just kind of clicking. But I want to sort of, because it feels like there's almost like three podcasts in this one. You could probably do a 0 to 1, a 1 to 10, and then this 10 to 20. But it sounds like the 1 to 10 was the hardest part of the journey.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why you're now focused on that, because I imagine you believe that is consistently, the hardest part of the journey. And as someone who's been through it and been through it successfully. So let's maybe zoom in there. And I think we started talking about culture. So let's stay down that thread. Because I imagine that was also when you hired the most people. Was it from like 1 to 10? I imagine that's when you went on a pretty big spurt.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I used to have, I'm sure there's a spreadsheet I have somewhere that has like what their attrition rates are, number of people hired, probably from 1 to 10. Although, look, in revenue, at least for our model, which we did not have product-led growth, we did not have any viral components. We had an inbound motion and an outbound motion and an SDR motion, which was primarily outbound. And whenever you have that kind of sales motion, you know how you grow revenue? You add people. Like there's a natural limit to the capacity that a sales rep can carry, like how much quota they can carry in a year or in a month. And so, like when I said we went from 10 to 20 in 18 months, that was probably the most rapid expansion. But the reason I paused is because before that, COVID happened. Before we hit 10, COVID happened, which was a weird time for everyone in the world, obviously, but certainly in venture-backed
Especially in your
software.
space. Yeah.
In construction.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that construction was ripping. Like at first it was weird, but then for all of 2020 and most of 2021, it was like a really good market to be selling into construction. We didn't know that on Friday, March 13th was like the last day of the previous world when everybody was, I remember we were in a planning session, like a quarterly planning, and we would do it middle of the last month of the quarter and ahead of the next quarter. And I remember sitting there being like, so do we think that like anything's going to happen with this COVID stuff? We're going to have to close down. And that was the last time that group saw each other in person for like 2 years. Right.
I see.
And the kicker, Scott, is that on Monday, March 16th, 2020, I started a class of 14 new sales reps.
Shit.
Yeah. So we were at that.
Were they supposed to be in person? Or was it always planned to be?
Yeah, we had everybody planning to fly to New Orleans because that's what we were doing. So let me back up real quick. So we raised our Series C. It was a $30 million round. That was at the end of 2019. And the reason we raised it is because we had kind of figured it out. Like we were at, I don't know, whatever, 8.5 or thereabouts, and the sales motion was working. We had figured out how to turn our own product data into leads and had a successful outbound motion. The traffic was growing. We could source inbound leads pretty consistently, and we knew the conversion rates. We had our handle around the economics. We had real enterprise pipeline. We had just closed a few like marquee, $500,000 plus deals that were valuable from a revenue standpoint, but also valuable strategically. And so like the end of 19, there was a ton of momentum. And we said, okay, great. Let's go really scale the sales motion because we can see how this goes. This scales the revenue number, and it was inputs and outputs. If we can onboard them, and there's a certain success rate in an onboarding class, well, then here's how the revenue will scale. So we were adding 14 new reps every other month, and we would run them through a 2-month boot camp. I guess we called it Levelset Sales Academy, and it was awesome. Like it really. I wish we didn't have to tear the whole thing down because of COVID, but basically, had we kept it up, we could have just every other month kept running them through. Well, and we were an in-person team. We had the Austin office, we had the New Orleans office. We did not hire remote at all. And then COVID happened. We riffed it was April 1st, 2020. That was the date. I don't know why we picked April Fool's Day, but that was the date. It was terrible. A lot of people went through it. the other revenue leaders went through it. And then we like pulled the handbrake real hard on sales team size because we didn't know what the economy was going to look like. And so I think retrenching and like getting a little more like a little more deliberate about the pace of how we're scaling ended up being a great thing. We grew 95% in 2020, but we didn't hire as aggressively until the latter part in the year. And as you know, it takes ramp time and the whole thing. So there was like beginning of 2021 got off to a slow start. And then by mid 2021, we were ripping. And that was when the revenue really just went like, and the other thing that we did, which I think gets back to your question around some lessons learned between 1 and 10, we didn't have an upsell or expansion motion at all. Well, I say that's not fair to the customer success team. We had a wonderful customer success team that was awesome, but we had hired that team to be trusted advisors and to be the advocate for the customer and to make sure that customers were successful. They also had the responsibility to upsell and expand and go ask for money, which is not really what we hired them to do. And so
Like a
I remember
different archetype.
yeah,
person,
totally.
yeah.
And also, by the way, ask for referrals and ask them to be a reference and ask for testimonials and 5-star reviews and ask them to be a part of a case study and ask them to give product
You can,
feedback and
you
on
can
and on and
only
on
have
and on.
so many asks,
It's and
as a
customer
single
success.
human. Yeah.
It's like it's one of the hardest jobs in the organization because you're on the front lines. You have to be the strategic advisor. You also have to be a firefighter at times, and it's like what is it? Not what is it? Thankless. That's the word. It's like it's a thankless job sometimes because you really carry a lot of water. And so Gretchen Lynn, the VP of Customer Success, she was employee number 1 at Levelset. She was like the backbone of the culture and all this stuff. But anyway, we would work very closely together and we sat down, we're looking at the upsell number and I'm looking at our install base. And at that point we had, I don't know, 8 million, not 8.5 million, maybe more. And we were getting like $30,000 a month in upsell. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like there has to be more compared to $700,000 a month in new logo bookings. I'm like, something is off. So, we listened to the calls. We had tons of conversation around, okay, what if we take this upsell and expansion motion and bring it over to the sales side, hire salespeople to do it, comp them like salespeople, 50% variable, 50% base salary, give them quotas, build a playbook around it, and let them go sell into the install base while continuing to invest in the customer success motion to be the trusted advisor, to make sure that there's high engagement, run the QBRs, et cetera. And we made that switch in the middle of 2020. It took a while to get it right because teams were stepping on each other's toes and the salesperson's calling and the CS person's calling and the onboarding person's calling all within like 2 hours of each other on the same day. Like we had to get the rules of engagement figured out. But within 6 months, we'd gotten that upsell motion from 30,000 a month to like $500,000 a month.
Wow. So a question on that, because I saw this not as soon, but 3 to 4 months after we did this at Outreach, lights out, changed the trajectory of the business. I've heard a lot of folks come on this podcast and say when they made that shift of having, call them account managers, true sellers, comp like salespeople, to go and be a counterpart to CS, like almost every time I've heard it, it seems to work. When is too early? Like when it seems like you should introduce that pretty damn quickly if it is working so well for people. Is there too early?
Yeah, like you need to have enough of an install base that you can actually carry somebody's quota. So let's just use simple math. If you want a salesperson to make $100,000 a year, to use a round number, you want the economics roughly to be, let's say 4x. Like 5x would be better, but 4x. So if they're going to make 100 grand, they've got to carry at least $400,000 in quota. If you're going to comp them 10%, then what's $100,000? How does that work? Yeah, because 50,000 is 10% of 500,000. So like whatever, do your math. I'm not good at public math, but my point is they have to be able to close at least $400,000 to $500,000 in expansion. Well, okay, how much of an install base do you need to close $500,000 in expansion revenue? You probably need like at least 2 million, 2.5, maybe 3 million. And so I think as you're getting to like between 3 and 5 million, it's probably the time to put a single person who is exclusively responsible for running that motion. And you got to figure it out. Like if you have 5 customers that make up that 3 million, then you're going to have a different motion than if you have an SMB motion like what we had. And we just had a lot of opportunity to take people from legacy prices to what would be like a very fair and modern price, because somebody, usually me, way early on, 6 years ago, 5 years ago in the life cycle of that customer, sold them for like $1,700 for some all you can eat buffet price that was like, we just need customers and we don't know our pricing and whatever. So it's easy to talk about this stuff academically. It's just you have to look at the business and what the customer mix is and how far along they are in their packaging and the product too. Like by the time we made that switch, we had a big enough product where there were opportunities for cross sell. The packaging was established well enough where we really understood our value metric. We could be confident and have leverage with customers who maybe consumed a certain portion of their credits or what have you. I don't mean to get too technical, but the question of is there a time that is too early? Yeah, if you don't have enough customers to support one salesperson to make $100,000 a year, well then go get more customers, and then the founder does the upsell motion.
Yeah, I like that call out on product. Yeah, I think it's a factor of total ARR, but then also does your product allow you to go into other business units that you have that you can cross-sell, upsell into? Because, it's not always going to be the case where the business unit you've sold into is naturally going to continue to grow. You might need to go into other parts of your customer's organization to actually upsell.
Yeah, and look, you see a lot of companies right now that are kind of nervous or shaking in their boots a little bit because they have user-based pricing or seat-based pricing. And a lot of the conversation right now with AI is if headcounts aren't growing, then how do you grow enterprise value if you are tied to seat count? And you see a lot of companies switching to usage-based pricing and having some sort of credit system, or maybe they do 2 or 3 tiers. Like so they'll have like a base price and they'll have a tariff on credits, and then they'll also charge for seats or feature sets. There's a million ways. Like I'm not a product packaging expert. There's a lot of folks that are good at that. But what I know and what we anchored on really early that was the right decision was, for us, the number of construction projects was a really easy proxy for the size of the business and the value that we delivered. And so we anchored to construction project volume, and it solved for a lot of problems that we had in the business prior to that. But look, we were also $3 or $4 million in, right? Like at $3 or $4 million in ARR before we figured any of that stuff out, and we still didn't like packaging.
So were you seat-based before, and then at 3 to 4 you switched to project?
Brother, we were every kind of base. We were seat-based, we were flat price. We did.
How much will you pay me, and how do I structure this?
Yeah, it's like, can you pay money in like American dollars? Great. I don't care if you send it on a carrier
fine
pigeon.
Too, honestly.
That's right. I don't care. Yeah, that's it's funny. Like later on, you get a little more discipline around this kind of stuff, and you're like, you have terms, and you only do deals in certain ways. But I definitely have the like scrappy 0 to 1 mentality. I'm like, can they send cash in a duffel bag on a truck? Like, it doesn't matter. I'll go
pick
it
up. Is it in this
whatever.
state?
I'm gonna say, I just got to get the deal. Go close the deal.
I love it. All right. Before we move on to a founder question, I really like this one that was sent in. I think you'll have a good kind of structure for it. But before we go there, looking back again from the 1 to 10, if I could fly you back in a time machine and you could fix one mistake that you made during that time period, what would it be?
So I'm like embarrassed to say this out loud because now I'm like, follow the playbook, Mr. Procedure, all this stuff. That is a learned trait. Like that's not natural to me. I had to contort my own personality or my own habits to adopt a more rigor in how I coached and how I led and how I acted as a salesperson. We didn't have a real sales playbook until 2018. That was 5 years in. And so we were closing deals almost in spite of ourselves. Now, we were attentive and we coached. I don't think we ever really sat down and understood, here's how you get a prospect from totally cold or, an inbound lead all the way through with like objective markers and stages. And we had a CRM, we had sales stages. It's not like I didn't try. We didn't really understand a sales playbook until I wish if I could do it again, knowing what I know now, I know we could go faster. If for no other reason, then we would just have more discipline around how we ran deals and what the process was for how to get, confirming champions and setting clear next steps and running pipeline meetings and all of the like blocking and tackling of running a sales organization. We did it wrong for a long time. And that was a bit of a coming of age tale for me as a leader. And I'm just thankful that I didn't get fired along the way because I probably should have been. But that's probably the number one thing I do differently. There's a lot of hiring mistakes that I've made. There's a lot of firing mistakes that I've made. I wish there's so many conversations that I wish I could have back with people that, I made mistakes or I didn't give them the right experience for how we parted ways. Like there's a lot of those those still keep me up at night where I'm just like, man, I wish I had that back. They didn't deserve that kind of thing. That was on me. And that's a little bit of my naivety or lack of experience as a leader. But I'd say like the thing that probably hindered our growth was really around the sales playbook. And also learning that like this may be specific to me. The way that I sell, like if I have to carry a bag in the way that I sell, I don't know how to teach anybody to sell the way that I sell. Cause I don't know. Not that I'm like God's greatest gift to sales or whatever. I kind of just go and do the thing and I close deals, right? Like, and I don't know how to make the connection between A and B. And so that's why it took me so long to codify it into a playbook, and then like get some religion around it. Is I had to get outside of myself and actually like articulate, okay, what is the process by which a salesperson guides a buyer from being, problem aware all the way to making a purchase decision. And part of that, I think I was like fearful or like afraid to get into the weeds. And so for a long time as a leader, I didn't do the most fundamental thing that's required as a revenue leader, which is deal by deal, going through pipeline, painstakingly going through pipeline, looking at every deal, making sure that it's compliant with the playbook. And like I said, that wasn't until like 2018, 2019. And that was when I really came into my own as a revenue leader. I think if I'm like, give myself a grade or that was the pivotal moment that year where I got serious. I got more intentional. I got into the weeds. I worked every single deal. Not me, like I worked behind the rep on every single deal to support them and to guide them. And that was that's a mistake. It was waiting too long to build that skill or waiting too long to learn that that's what's required. Because like I've met people through GTM Fund or other folks that are executive revenue leaders at very big companies, bigger than what I ever built. And they still get granular and get into the pipeline. And you sit into their pipeline meetings or their forecast meetings, and they can go down to like who the contact is on a key deal and know the next steps. And when you see somebody who runs $1 billion ARR organization getting to that level of detail in the forecast meeting, well, then what's your excuse at 5 million or 2 million or 10 million? And I don't know, maybe I was just like, my ego got in the way or I just didn't, I was ignorant, like, or too naive. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I don't
think
know if
part
that
of it,
answers the question, but that's what I'd go back and do differently. Cause that's what I do now. Like as I
yeah.
coach companies and help them, I'm like, look, it's in the tape. Like go look at the pipeline, go look at the deals.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. It's, I think one of the things is when skills and this process sort of naturally, intuitively come to you, which it sounds like in sales, that kind of, it was natural for you. You kind of make this assumption, and I've fallen prey to this in the past too, is that everyone sort of thinks like you and that it
Yeah.
would intuitively come to them as well. So why do I have to go in the weeds when like we all know that this would be a natural next step? And then you come to learn over time, like, oh no, like many folks need that. Okay, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 4.5, step
Yes.
4.75. So I think that's a fantastic learning. And now you're went against your nature, and now you spend all of your time, teaching folks how to do the same, which I think is cool. All right, founder question. This is a great one, and I don't think we talk enough about team structure, and I know it's pretty nuanced, but the question is, we're at 5 million in ARR, and it's starting to feel like we're understaffed across sales, marketing, and business development. Is there an optimal team structure at this stage for each department? They do give a little more context, saying we sell into SMBs and our sales cycles aren't overly complex.
So the question, just so I can repeat it back, the question is, what's the optimal team structure for our stage and scale?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Well, I don't know, but let me
It's
guess.
always the right answer when these
Yeah,
questions
I don't
come
know.
in.
Here's how I think about it. For transactional sales teams, for SMB sales teams, it's kind of a math problem. Like the team structure is going to be dependent on what your growth goals are. So what I'd do is if we were sitting, and by the way, whoever that founder is, reach out to me. Like I'm very responsive and I'll walk you through it. What are the mistakes that so many early stage sales leaders make in the annual planning season, which is like what we're in right now? Or don't do what we did, which is do your annual planning between Christmas and New Year's. You have like 1 week to get all of you. Yeah, hopefully you start earlier than that. But when you look at your annual plan, you're going to put a headcount plan together. There's two ways to look at it. You can go top down, which you absolutely have to. You have to look at what's the demand model look like. If you have an inbound motion or an outbound motion or a combined motion, or if you're using events like conferences or field events, however you're driving demand, have a forecast for what kind of demand you think is going to happen over the and at 5 million in ARR, you should have a pretty good sense for where your demand's coming from. So just like drag it out, look over the next year, and then based on your historical conversion rate, or maybe your like rolling 90-day conversion rate, what does that look like from a bookings perspective? And then bottoms up, do your capacity model. How many reps do you have? What's the average quota capacity? What does that total up to? Do not get into a situation where you have less quota capacity than what your revenue target is.
Mm-hmm.
Every single revenue leader listening to this podcast knows what it feels like when you don't have enough coverage and you've got to get everybody to just redline the entire quarter to go make up the number. By the way, you also have to go hire to go backfill those seats, and you have a ramp period. So the advice there is we'd look at your annual plan, do a top-down model and do a bottoms-up model. And they should overlap. Maybe you'll have a gap, but you can kind of tweak the numbers. A couple of notes, don't forget to model in attrition and model in ramp time, right? It takes people time to get up to speed, and you're going to lose some folks over the course of the year, especially in an SMB team. Takes, I don't know, 18 to 24 months is probably your average tenure for an SMB sales rep. They just burn out. Like when you have a 1 week to 2 week sales cycle, you can only do that motion for so long before your nerve endings just get frayed and you've got to move onto like a more sophisticated sale, frankly.
Yeah.
And so what's the optimal team structure? It's all going to be based on what your revenue target is. And then let's say your per rep per month quota is 50,000 in ARR. Okay, great. Well, if you want to go close another $5 million next year, what is that a month? It's like $450,000 a month. So 450 divided by 50,000 is 9. You need 9 reps. You probably need 10 because you need some buffer. That's 2 teams. You need a sales manager for each team of 5. I'm definitely speed running through this and throwing out a bunch of like, I have some rules of thumb around structures, but that's what I'd look at. As it relates to marketing, I can't help you there. I mean, I can make some suggestions, but I'm less experienced on building the marketing teams. Once you get past like 7-8 million in ARR, and then BD. When you say BD, I assume what you mean is SDR.
Correct. Yeah.
We didn't have SDRs for our SMB motion. All of our reps were full desk. They source their own pipeline. and they closed their own deals and ran their own demos. And so the summary, the TLDR is it's all going to be dependent on what your growth goals are back into the number by using a top-down demand-based model and a bottoms-up capacity-based model, measure those against each other. And that should give you your sales rep headcount plan. And then for BD, if your demand model is based on the number of SDR heads and the average performance per SDR, well, that's what's going to tell you what your team structure should look like. And the last thing I'll say on this is do your reps a favor and try not to have SMB teams that are larger than 10 people, 10 to 1, like manager to rep. I like 6 to 7 to 1. If your P&L can afford it and if you have enough profitability, just because once you get over 10 reps, you're kind of doing a disservice to the individual salesperson because they don't get the coaching and development that they need.
Yeah. I'm going to add on my own question on that. At Levelset, did you break? I know this is like common in enterprise and strategic, but did you break up your SMB team by type of customer, like persona at all, or were they all just trained on the same?
At times, yeah. So for example, like we built a waiver, lien waivers products that was specific to general contractors. And so we wanted to like take general contractor leads, put them in its own funnel and have an outbound motion with that funnel. And so at times we would select certain groups, like roofing companies was a big customer base for us. And so we had a team that was like really good at selling into roofers and we'd send them to the roofing conferences and things like that. So yeah, we were a little opportunistic with it, but it wasn't like so as an alternative, for example, like Procore does this or Building Connected did it before they got bought by Autodesk, where they'll have like a GC team and then a supplier team and then a contractor team. We didn't do that until the very, very end. And that was really more of like segments, SMB, mid-market versus enterprise. So I guess the short answer is no. Yes, kind of, but not really.
Yeah. I love it. A lot of good stuff there. And whoever asked that question, it was anonymous, or else I'd call them out. But hit up Martin Roth on LinkedIn. All right, final 2 questions for you as we wrap up. First question is, what's one thing that revenue leaders still hold to be true in 2024 that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
I'm gonna give 3 things real quick. Number 1, I think that if you're running an SDR team, a high velocity sales team, an SMB team, I think you need to be in person. I don't think remote sales environments work well for people who are early in their career, for a bunch of reasons.
Agree. Strongly agree.
Yeah. So that's number 1. I think enterprise sales, you can be wherever because like you got to be on planes, trains, and automobiles no matter what. But for early in your career, get in person. And if you're a salesperson listening to this, like don't take a job that's remote. You're putting yourself laps and laps and laps behind your peer set in skills development. Get in person if you can. Second thing is, I like to say micromanagement is a good thing. My good friend Kyle Norton says, don't call it micromanagement, call it micro coaching. He's right, I'm wrong, but the point still remains. Don't hire people and let them do their thing, especially not in a sales organization. Like I made that mistake early on. And then I learned, oh no, you actually have to have a process and a playbook and you have to coach people and you have to support them. Now, every salesperson has to have their own flavor and put their own, personality onto it. But at the end of the day, like you have to manage people in a sales organization. And I think you see a lot of rhetoric with sales leaders that are like, oh, we're just going to hire great people and let them operate. Like, I've never seen that work well. So I'd say like that's BS. The one that my favorite here is all of the conversation around how cold outbound is dead. I think that's total BS. Every good thing in my professional life has come from cold outreach in some capacity. Now, maybe your cold outreach sucks. You need to work on your messaging. There's these guys, huh? The cold calling sucks guys. I'm not trying to make ads for like all these books that I keep. Armand Frugan. Didn't one of these was at
You only
Outreach,
get
weren't they?
15% of each book that goes to this
I don't get
podcast, right?
anything. Like,
Just a
actually,
small.
I'd love.
I'm kidding.
I would love an affiliate deal for anybody who's booked. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I don't want affiliate deals. No, but this. So like the reason they wrote this book, and it's actually good. It's got some good stats in it. But the whole thing is like it sucks. Cold calling sucks. That's why it works. Most people don't do it, and when they do it very poorly. Cold outreach absolutely works. Absolutely works.
And
but
it's a
you
skill
have
you
to
have
do it.
to learn. I talked
Yes.
about this. Like, let's say even in a world where cold calling and cold emailing doesn't work, if you are not doing that and learning the rejection that comes from that, you're going to be a much shittier seller, closer, enterprise AE, revenue leader, whatever. Like just the act of doing that alone is teaching you so much about the art and science of selling, which is interesting. You're like almost losing the byproduct if you're not doing that, which is grit and resilience and, all these things that come by doing hard things.
Totally. Now, I don't want to speak ill about your previous employer because we used Outreach. We were an Outreach customer. But I think that Outreach, it's been a while since I've really spent time in that product or in SalesLoft or any of the other like thousands of Me Too products that have come out. I think for a time it worked. And I think that time has kind of passed in the way that we used to use it, which is like a 12 by 12. It's 12 calls and 12 emails over this cadence. Highly personalized works. It's more effective. And so the cold outreach works, but there is no like set it and forget it version of cold outreach. Don't believe what you read on LinkedIn. Like you actually build a list. The list is kind of that's the strategy. That's stolen from my good friend Jordan Crawford, he's in GTM Fund. You should get him on here. That dude is a freaking Jedi when it comes to list building and using clay. But the list is the strategy. If you build your list right and you know your list intimately, then you're going to find ways to get personalized and get creative and get into those accounts. Cold outreach works. I still from 10 years of calling into large building material suppliers, when I go drive around town and I see Ferguson or ABC Supply, like I still see the logos and they're like singed into my brain because I thought about them every day. And how do I get into this account? Who's another angle? Asking for referrals. Like I don't know how to put that into words, but like cold outreach works, but you have to be committed to it. This isn't like a campaign that you run. It's just, this is the job.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet you, nothing outlined the importance of cold outreach and like shifted mine than fundraising. Obviously we fundraise
totally.
for our fund, and there's like, especially on the institutional side, there is only a certain amount of LPs that invest in emerging managers out there. So like you have a list of 150, and these are the only people in the world that are going to potentially give you money. So all of a sudden you get really fucking creative with your outreach.
Don't waste it.
You spend 8 hours mapping out every relationship that could potentially get you there, scoring them of, okay, this one looks like the most connectivity. Let's check with that one. Let's figure out how to make the ask that I'm going to ask this person a give for them. What can we do? Like it completely changes your way of thinking, and it's never a set it or forget it. These are relationships that you're building over time, and everything you're doing is getting you closer to that meeting, that next interaction.
Totally.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Final one. What is one go-to-market strategy or tactic that's currently working today for the companies that you consult and advise for?
The one that I find myself pointing to most often is, this isn't like a hack or some like new thing. It's kind of like what's old is new again. If you're selling $15,000, $20,000 ARR products or larger, so like, lower mid-market or bigger, go get in person with customers. Like once a month, each rep should be in market meeting with customers. Now, there's a way to make that more efficient. I always advocate for building territories that are specific to a MSA, like a metro sales area, as opposed to doing a region. So don't do the Southeast, do like Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And if you're calling on, for us, it was construction companies in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, well, I can get really effective whenever I get in market once a month to go meet with people that are in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Better yet, if I even live in that market. But that's one thing is the campaign that I would build. That's a coordination between sales and marketing. Is if you have the budget for it once a month. If you have less budget for it, do it once a quarter. Or if you have no budget at all, at least go get in market. But once a quarter, do a field event. Go to a Top Golf or whatever the market you're selling into. Find a place that they want to convene. It could be pickleball. It could be whatever. Invite existing customers. Invite your prospective customers, and you create your own mini event. You don't have to wait for the big conference. You can create your own. What do they call it? You can create your own road tour or road show of your brand in market and start with the top 5 biggest cities. So if in 2025 you picked 5 cities, you did 5 roadshow events, you put enough marketing and sales effort behind it, you made it anchor, you flew the team out there, they got in person. Every single one of those events is not just ROI positive, but becomes this like flywheel for brand and connection. And so that's a tactic that I've recommended a few dozen times. Handful of companies have taken me up on it. And each one of those companies is like, this is working. It's working really well. Because it's just a complement to the outreach that you're already doing in market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. That in person, and as you said, these things kind of come in cycles. We all went like overly digital and everything was there. And now people are craving in-person connection again. But man, this has been awesome. I appreciate the time, man. It was really good to catch up with you, hear your story. Love the way you think about sales and scaling companies. And I'm very excited to hear what's next for you. And for folks that want to follow along with your journey, maybe have some questions for you, best way to get in touch with you is a LinkedIn guy, X guy. What's the best way?
Yes, and you can find me on Twitter or X. It's the Martin Roth. You can find me on LinkedIn. I post pretty regularly there. And then martinroth.com. My email is martin@martinroth.com. I'm pretty responsive. And I want to hear from you. I love this stuff. I love talking about sales. I love helping founders and executive sales leaders. And I'm working on a new business that is not the advisory work, but in the meantime, I'm available. So hit me up.
I love it. Well, for all our listeners, thank you for hanging out with us. I say it every week, but listening is one thing, executing something totally different. Hopefully we gave you some ideas, tactics, strategies that you can use in your own business. And we'll see you next week.